Well, hello friends. You're gonna know someone different is with me today, and that is someone you've never met. This is my Aunt Julie. This is my dad's only sister, his only sibling, and while you know my dad passed away in 2004, my aunt is actually a really good representation. They look a lot the same, they act a lot the same, so this is really fun to be here.
I'm a lot shorter.
You are, my dad was tall. He was tall.
He was 6'4". He was very tall.
He was 6'4", that's right. He was taller than me, so he was much taller. But what's great is Julie only lives a ways away. We're just about 30 minutes from home. And she has this area that's kind of a difficult spot for her in her yard and asked if I had any ideas. And I said, you know what? I think instead of ideas, why don't I just come and do it? So as long as Julie is okay with me taking the reins.
I was pleased.
Let's talk about what is to you difficult about this spot. This is in the back of her patio on the north side, right? Okay. And tell us a little bit. It looks a little wet.
It's very wet. It gets very this part never really gets any sun.
So right now we're looking about almost the most sun really that sees back here.
Yes, for a few hours you'll get a little bit of sun because there are screen porch areas on both sides that shade it for a lot of the day. Very clayish, water stands in it. Doesn't drain well.
Those are all things we're gonna hopefully address. You're gonna notice back there are 2 containers. Both of those are coneflower that Julie bought last year, and when we weren't sure what we were gonna do, I said just heel them in. So she actually just had them dug down into the ground. They sat there all winter and they lived, thankfully. And we're gonna use them, but we're gonna use them out more in the sunny area. So what I did was drew up a quick plan of an idea that we could use here, and I did switch a few things when I saw the light because we have a lot of shade, not a lot of sun. So we have a little section out here that's gonna be able to get some sun and a little bit more area of shade. So for the shade items, and some viewers that have followed for a while will know some of these plants because they know I love them. But we're doing Sun King Aurelia. It's really bright. It has chartreuse colors. It does get a flower, but it's more grown for the foliage.
Sure.
But it does really well in shade with some good bright light, which this will still get nice bright light. We're also gonna do a few hosta back here, all-purpose shade-loving plants. In front, we're gonna do some of the all-gold Japanese forest grass, which Julie did have at her previous home, and did tell me that she thought maybe it was growing a little aggressively. The one caveat I feel like for this area, if it does, I wish mine at home grew aggressively. It doesn't, but Julie apparently has a green thumb. I said, I said what would be great is there's a lot of area to fill in. So if that Japanese forest grass is able to fill in these fronts area and just take over where it's a perennial and it will die back, that's kind of a nice thing to have here. We are gonna utilize 2 pots Julie had, and we're gonna put annuals in them, just for some color, every year she can change them out depending, or I can come change them out. That's a quick one.
You heard it.
I can. We're gonna put in the sun area some coneflower, because coneflower can take a little bit of shade, so they should do okay even if they don't get that full sun. We're gonna do a little bit of Caradonna salvia, which I just showed Julie recently, and I like them because they have a dark stem, so they have interest anyway, and then a tall purple flower, and then some Baptisia, which is one of my favorites. It doesn't look like a lot right now, but in time, I think you'll see why. But the big thing we're gonna do today too is tackle, since it's bad soil, I'm gonna amend it slightly with some compost to make sure we can slowly start building that soil. We're gonna add some fertilizer. We're going to mulch it in the end to hopefully suppress weeds. I don't think retaining moisture is a big issue here, but suppress the weeds.
Yeah, I don't like weeding.
So we're gonna tackle all that today and hopefully see kind of a new fun bed. So I hope you're excited for it.
I am excited.
Oh, good. I think it will be a nice change. They just redid the fence back behind it, so it's all fresh and ready. And it may be a little bit of work with clay. As you know at home, this is gonna be a very different soil and garden for me because I happen to have where Julie grew up actually. She grew up in my home, well, in the home my mom lives in, and it has black, rich soil.
For 8 foot down.
You can just dig and there's no rocks, there's no clay. So this will be a nice change and me to get used to something new. So that's what we're gonna do.
Sounds fabulous.
Let's get started. So what I have started with is just making sure I turn over all the soil. I'm just using a shovel or a spade here at first to turn it over. And the reason is this has not been used for a long time. This has not been planted in for a long time. It's actually sat for a long time. And you can tell that. It's pretty clumpy and cloddy. So what I want to do is get to a point where I can get my small tiller to work with it, but also work in some amendments. What I like about this area is this is going to show if you have a small area that maybe is a hard one to work with, maybe it gets a lot of shade, maybe it gets some sun like this does, there are ways to work around that. But the most important thing to do is start with your soil health. So what I'm doing is just finishing up turning the soil, as you can see. And I'm just flipping it over And then what I'm gonna do is start sprinkling on my amendments. Now, my first amendment, and the only amendment really I'm using today, is a good organic compost. I've been using this at home too. My compost, my home pile isn't quite ready, so I've been using this a lot. And I really like this because what it's gonna do is gonna help the nutrition of the soil, help the composition of the soil. But if you look at the nice texture of it, it also is gonna help aerate the soil. And since we have kind of some drainage issues here, you can tell that this material has almost like a fine mulch quality, but it's not mulch, it's a compost. And this is gonna actually just work into that soil when I till it. So what I'm gonna do is sprinkle bags of this on before I till it so I can work it in with the tiller. I'm putting on my last bag. And with amendments, you have to remember, any amount is gonna help somewhat. It's not all gonna change the soil right away overnight, but it slowly enhances that soil. And even if you can only do a small amount, each little amount will make a difference. So before I till that in, I'm gonna make sure I put my bag there. I'm gonna use some plant tone. So again, this area doesn't necessarily have a lot of nutrients in it. And you know, when you think about newer builds, sometimes the backfill they use isn't as good either. So what I wanna make sure to do is add in some plant tone. And this is just gonna get worked into the soil overall as just an all-purpose, kind of nice fertilizer. And this is just a good way, again, if I was gonna be doing a vegetable garden, I would have done garden tone. But the plant tone here is just a nice all-purpose way to just slowly add some nice organic fertilizer. Now what I can do is start tilling. Now it could take a while. We've recently had some rain, so there is some moisture in the soil. So it could take a while to get it to a nice smooth consistency. And I brought my small tiller, not my larger one, just because that's harder to move around. This one does a good job at working up. And really what we're looking at is at least the top 4 inches. That's where I want that amendment and that plant tone to work into. And that's what these will allow me to do. So I'll get it started and then I'll just start going through it. After I tilled everything, it actually tilled up much better than I thought it would. I was a little afraid because it looked a little wet, but it's beautiful, much richer. There was some sphagnum moss that I don't usually use sphagnum just because of the way it is harvested isn't always the best, but they had some just to use up, which is totally fine because it does help aerate. So in this point, I did work a little bit of what they had just right into the soil. I raked it out into an even level just to make sure, because once I till, with that tiller, as you saw, I have to kind of always be pulling back. It doesn't necessarily propel itself as easily, but it works the ground really nicely. So then I just take a rake and make sure I can level it out, which is just about perfect right now. Just remember, I'm not a professional designer. I just lay things out kind of in my head. I did draw this out so my aunt could see what my thoughts were. Otherwise, they're just up in my head. But now what I like to do is visually space it out with the plants I have. So we were able to get some gorgeous plants locally in beautiful, I mean, they're just beautiful specimens. And so you can, I think, instantly tell why I love this Sun King Aurelia. Look at the color it's gonna pop against this back little fence. It really has so much color. They really will get to a nice height and shape. And all of this stuff, because Julie wanted low maintenance, dies back to the ground just like any perennial, and then can just be easily taken off the next spring, adjusted as needed. But what I'm doing is just gonna lay everything out, kind of visually make sure it makes sense, and then we'll come in and we'll start planting. I have everything laid out, and I always like that because then I can adjust slightly as needed. Now remember, there are some parameters here. There is some rock under the soil in certain areas, so I stay in further maybe. There's also, you can see just a very small amount of sun, so I'm making sure to adjust and have the sun-loving ones out there. But I picked sun perennials that can do with some partial sun too. Both Baptisia and coneflower can take a little bit of that partial sun, so they should work really well here. Now I'm gonna start with planting the Aurelia. I really love this plant because it's instant color and texture, and that's what I want. So when I go to plant them, I'm gonna make sure to dig my hole just like I would any other time. Now, since I already amended the soil, I'm not gonna amend directly in the hole itself. We amended with that wonderful compost already. So I'm just gonna dig my hole, And then right down into this hole, I'm gonna make sure to put my biotone. So again, especially in an area where you're feeling like maybe the soil's lacking, but I do this all the time at home too, get that biotone in there to really help those roots get acclimated and activated. And usually plants, you have to check how tight they are. So with this one, you can see it's actually not too bad. I can lightly break it up just a little bit. I don't want to do it too much, but just enough to kind of start exposing a little bit of those artillery roots out here on the edges. That's going to help them want to branch out. So I'm going to do that, plant it in, make sure it's not too deep. Now that's always my second thing. When you look, make sure this is not any lower in the soil than it was in the container. If it sits too low, it can suffocate the roots. It can cause rot from rain sitting on it, especially in sometimes a wet area. So then I'm just going to backfill with that soil. We already have the amendment of the compost in there. And at the end, we'll mulch everything too, which will have a few really good benefits. So it's going to take me a little bit to plant some of these things, but this is really, to me, this is now the fun part. We did the hard work. We did the amending, we did the tilling. Now we can actually plant and see some instant gratification. So we're ending with the last coneflower, and I mentioned in the beginning, these were healed in. So last fall, Julie bought a couple of coneflower on sale, was thinking about planting them, and then talked to me. And since I didn't have a good vision yet or a good thought, and it was getting late in the year to find plants, I said, let's just heal these coneflower in. And if you haven't done that, all that really means is the whole pot, you can tell, the pot and the plant and everything was just dug down into the ground. It's like you plant the pot, kind of. And then that just is a way to protect it over the winter. And they did come back, which is what we wanted. And we're gonna bring them now out to the sun, which is, to me, the important part here. Coneflower, they can take some partial sun, but they do like that sun. So hopefully now these will do a little bit better, that they're being pushed out, but they did live over the winter. So I've done this too. Like if you ever have a plant that maybe you're just not getting around to planting or you're not ready for it yet, it's not always a surefire gonna live through it, but you can plant it, the whole pot and everything, in the ground and just kind of heal it in over the winter and then plant it later the following year or whatever you need to do. So once now I have all these plants planted, the one thing I do want to do is also give the hosta just a little bit extra fertilizer. So hosta like acidic fertilizer, so I use Hollytone on them. It's just, again, you could put it down in the hole, but I like to do it a little bit slower and just put it up around the plant. This is what I'll do with some of my hosta at home in the spring. I'll just sprinkle in the Hollytone and kind of work it into the soil. This is just an added benefit for the hosta since they like those more acidic fertilizers. It's a nice organic way just to slowly feed the hosta. Nothing too strong. It just gives them a little bit of what they need. And we can do this year after year. To finish up, I am just spreading out some hardwood mulch. I just use hardwood mulch, no fillers in it. I want no color added to it, nothing added to it, just traditional hardwood mulch. And what I like about mulch, I do a 2 to 3 inch layer. It should decompose into the soil. That's the point of mulch. So until it decomposes, you don't really need to add more mulch. And instead what it will do is suppress the weeds. It will retain moisture in places. Obviously this wasn't the biggest issue here, but the weed suppression will be important. And especially with new plants, you don't want them to dry out. Even if their surrounding soil stays wet, those new plants are planted in their medium they were growing in, which is usually lighter and will dry out quicker than the surrounding soil. So to brighten this up a little bit, Julie did happen to have, my aunt, a couple pots on hand that she said we could use and thought it'd be nice to plant a few annuals in them. So I've been planting the annuals, have a couple left in this one. This one gets a little bit of that bright light, not really direct sunlight, and the other one doesn't either. But what I'm doing is planting some nice bright colors. So that lemon coral sedum, and I'm intermixing it with some fuchsia, which fuchsia, if it's in the right spot, is so fun. It really wants to be in the right spot, and it likes kind of that more moist shade, which in this pot, you can keep it moist, but also in just this area. Doing some tuber begonias. I love tuber begonias. My mom used to plant these all the time growing up. And I love how unique the foliage is. And then you can see in the back, I have them offset with some caladium, which is just really fun. And these begonias will get much more mounded and tall. I need to add a little bit more soil in here. Potting soil, the big thing is anytime you fill a pot and then water it, that soil will condense. So make sure to water it well before you plant so it condenses a little bit. Back here too, we have a really fun caladium. We have a nice fern going on. It's in the Kimberly Queen family, some fuchsia. Isn't this white moon so fun? It's just gonna drape over the sides. It can take that partial shade. What I like about it is that little white flower has some yellow on it. So it actually goes really well right here with this beautiful Aurelia. They kind of intermix. So this is a really fun way. So what I'm gonna do is just clean up. We're gonna bring Julie back out and we're gonna just kind of finish it up and talk about everything there is in some plant care. So we got all done, so I think it's time that Julie sees what was happening back here. So Julie, do you want to come on out? This is your new bed.
It's perfect. I love it.
Do you really?
Thank you.
Do you? I mean, you don't have. Oh, Kip is excited too.
Everybody
I know.
wishes they had a nephew like you. Which is
No.
why you're my favorite nephew.
I'm her only nephew on this side of the family. So she has to say that. My grandma always says that too because I'm the only grandson on this side. This bed, the key of it for Julie was you asked for pretty much maintenance free or as low maintenance as possible.
So anything that I didn't have to know how to trim,
keep cutting back, whatever it
Yes.
is. So everything in this bed is a perennial that dies back to the ground every year. So every fall it will go dormant over the winter. You can keep it if you want just as interest. Some of it may blow away. And then in the spring, you can just crunch back anything that is brittle and it should be good to go and all come back from the ground. So that was really the key in this bed was low maintenance, but high impact on color. So in time, these will get that nice 3 to 4 foot, possibly tall, and they'll die back every year. But then same with over here, these Baptisia back here will get the same height. So you'll see them behind these planters. The planters we just filled with annuals that we can switch out year to year.
Yeah.
So if there's things you like versus don't like, things that work better or not. With sun, it can always change, but it looks like we're still, both of these are mostly in shade, so they should be pretty well. I'm hoping, and again, these coneflowers are a little bit of a test because they're right on the edge of some sun and some shade. I'm hoping you get some good blooms out of these. If not, it's one of the easy things that we can always adjust to something different in the future. But since they do like partial sun, I think these will actually do pretty well. And everything else, it kind of speaks for itself. But I hope for you, this is maintenance free. But I hope you also, because they have windows that look out on here, can enjoy it without having to do anything to it. Because that's kind of the point, other than water it in the beginning.
Oh, yes.
If it gets, no, this does stay moist, but the plants themselves are in a medium that may not stay as moist as the surrounding soil.
Of course.
So just like the pots themselves, these plants in this shaded more area, they probably only need it a couple times a week, I'm guessing, water at most. And we're still in a little bit cooler period. So I hope this helps. I hope this is valuable.
I love it.
The best thing is I'm only a phone call away, so if something doesn't work out. I always get nervous when I do something for someone else because I don't want it to, I don't want it to not do well.
No, I think it will,
Good.
and I look forward to watching it grow.
Oh, me too. I hope so. So as always, I will be sharing more of this, hopefully in future stories. I will maybe even pop in a year or two and kind of see how it's looking and how it's really adjusting. But if you enjoy this video or if this is something you can find useful, I hope you can share it around, let others see that there are ways to plant in areas that are hard, just like Julie is not alone. A lot of people live in town with areas like this that could be difficult, and I hope it can help you too. As always, check my website, wyseguide.com, for tips, for tricks, but also for recipes. They're on there too. So until next time, get out there and garden a little bit and enjoy it.